it pulled up. Never mind. You're good.
No, well, I was going to try to maximize it. I'm looking. How's that look?
Okay, that looks great.
Looks great. Okay. Now we're going to, just to let everybody know, I'm going to start, my name is Pat Nuri, Zenworks Technical Specialist with Novell. This first slide you're looking at here, this is my contact information, and the topic today is we're going to talk about Zenworks application virtualization. And now I cover all the technologies of Zenworks, so feel free to have any follow-up questions on this. You can use me as a technical resource on that. And if I can't answer it or at least make up a good answer, I'll certainly find somebody that can. So here is my email address and contact information. What I'm going to do is I'd like to go through a few slides. Let's talk about some of the concepts, and then we're going to flip the screen a little bit because I'd like to actually show you Zenworks application virtualization in action. And then I'd like to take you into the console and show you a little bit about what it takes to actually virtualize an application. So starting out, let's talk about what is Zenworks application virtualization. To try to keep it as in few words as possible, it's simplified application management. Today, when you virtualize an operating system, we're actually fooling the operating system into thinking that it has full access to a real NIC card, has full access to a disk channel, to RAM, that sort of thing, when in fact the reality is the operating system is all running on just software. Well, with application virtualization, we're doing the same concept. We're fooling an application into thinking it's already been installed, that it has full access to the registry, the Windows system files, whatever it needs to run, when in fact it never actually changes the base operating system. It all runs in its own memory space. Now, application management in general can be a challenge, and there are issues. If any of you on the call here, if you've had to distribute applications to your users, which is basically how we get users to work, you'll know there's lots of challenges about distributing applications. And I wanted to run through just a few of those issues. One of the issues is we got to figure out how to install applications. We got to get the files out to the machines. Then we have to run through a setup or an MSI install. We'd like to have that as silent as possible because we don't like our users clicking the options for us, so we want to automate that. Now, a lot of times we don't want to make our users administrators, and rightly so, but that right there is a security issue, and that how do I install applications that require administrator access to be installed? So I have to get over those kind of obstacles also when I'm installing applications. I got to worry about, hey, did it install successfully? How does it play with different versions of other things that might be installed? These are all factors and issues that you have to consider when we're traditionally installing applications in the network. And for that matter, how do we update these applications? So I painstakingly got it out to my users. Now there's an update. You know, how do I get that in place? How is it going to affect? Is there a back out? You know, if I break something, do I have to start all over? These are, again, issues that you have to worry about. What about components that application needs, like .NET or a particular version of Java, and I have to somehow get that out with the application too? How is that going to play with my other systems on the network? And then finally, just tossing out, how do I manage all the different versions? Like if I've got particular version of this application, I need to upgrade to another one. Can these versions coexist? Or how do these applications work if I move from 32-bit XP and go to 64-bit Windows? Is that a viable move? Can I move the applications there? Will they install the same way? Will they run? And all of these pieces. I mean, we could actually talk about this for another 30 minutes. But the point is I just wanted to point out some issues that you run into, and this is not all inclusive of traditional application install. Well, what's the answer to simplifying this? And that answer is Zenworks application virtualization. So why would we actually use this? How is that going to help us? Well, the first thing it can do is greatly simplify deployment. When you virtualize an application, you wrap it up into a single executable file. There is no install. Even the lowest user on a Windows box has the rights to execute. So again, we don't have to worry about security on this. There's no install. It all runs as a single executable. It runs in its own memory space. So even a low-end user would have the ability to launch a virtualized application. How do I get it out to my users? Well, it's one executable. I could copy it there. I could use a login script. I could use Zenworks configuration management to certainly distribute it out to a machine and give my users the ability to launch it. I could bring it to you on a USB drive. I could put it up on a web server and you download it and run it from there. Tons of different ways. But if you think about it, yeah, all I got to do is hand you an executable and you have already installed a fully working copy of whatever application it is that I just virtualized for you. You have safe execution of these. These applications, when they run, they're not altering the base operating system. They do not write into the real registry or into the system files or, in that matter, in the program files. By default, they do write to a sandbox area, which the default location is in the user profile. And this is mainly a cache area where that if the user makes changes inside of the applications, they have the ability that when they relaunch the applications, their changes are still there. And as we change things or preferences inside the app, these are preserved in this sandbox. But outside of that, the operating system remains untouched. So therefore, the application itself is not going to damage us or alter anything that we might have configured on the base system. This also allows us to get away with running different versions of applications that aren't designed to run on this particular system, like Adobe 8 and Adobe 9. Since they're both virtualized and they don't interact with each other, I could have both versions available on a system. I could run browsers of different versions that may or may not be supported on the base operating system. I can run applications that have different components, even if those components are not installed. For example, I can virtualize an app, include a particular Java version inside of that virtualization, and even if the base operating system does not have that Java version, I have everything that I need inside of that one executable. And then finally, among many different uses of why this is, but it makes your applications very portable. Since they're single executable, I could put them on a USB drive. I could walk up to a machine, put in that USB drive, and then run my applications right off the USB drive. I can run applications that the operating system does not have, and when I'm finished, I can pull the USB drive out and not leave any trace of anything that I was doing on that system. You can configure the sandbox to actually write back to the USB or to another location if you wanted to. Thus, I mean, you're fully productive anywhere that you can take these executables around. Now, what I want to do now is I'm going to hit escape here, and I'm going to share up, so 1 second here. I'm going to stop sharing here, and I'm going to share up my other station here so that you can kind of see what this looks like. So give me 1 second. Okay. Hopefully what you're looking at here in just a second is you're looking at a Windows 7 desktop. I'll pause just for a second in case there's a lag. Okay, this is a Windows 7 64-bit desktop, and I'm going to start by just opening up Explorer. And in Explorer, I'm just going to expand in here and look at program files. Program files here, this is the 64-bit side of program files. As you can see, this is pretty much a standard build right off the CD. I don't really see anything that's been installed on this system. And consequently, if I go to the 32-bit program files, I'm not seeing any applications other than just the default right off the Windows 7 CD that are installed here. So if we minimize here, and if I go into the Start menu, though, and it's kind of telling me a little bit different story. Like, for example, here's Visio 2003. And I also had a shortcut here for Visio 2007. Now, these are my test licenses, so I don't turn those on. But anyway, here's an example of me running two very different versions of Visio, and even though you just installed the program files, these aren't installed, I'm fully productive with both of these versions of Visio. close these out, and let's look at what other goodies are here. Well, here's Excel 2003. Here's Excel 2007 coming up there. And let's go for the big one here. This one will take just a second to gen up here. And what I'm going to show you here is that we've got now all three versions of Office, in this case, running on this particular system here. So whatever version you need, I could run Word or PowerPoint. Anything else I need is here. Let's see, here is IE6, and here's IE7. And of course, I've got the native IE8, which is installed into the base operating system. But just to give you an idea, I'm just showing you how, again, with virtualization, we're able to run applications, even though they were not designed for this particular operating system, we still can run these and componentize them as we need to. Now, the applications themselves, let's go ahead and look at how I'm doing this, can really live on the drive wherever you want them to. Now, in my particular case, I am having all of my virtual apps live in a temporary area that I created off of Windows here. I can then provide my users with shortcuts, such as leveraging Zenworks configuration management, for example. However I want to create the shortcuts, and my users can launch these. So what you're looking at here is all the virtualized apps that I have on the system. I just happen to have them living here. They can exist wherever we want them to. This is just a standardization that I'm using here. You can see their sizes off to the side. Basically, the size of a virtualized app is whatever it would be when it's fully installed on a system. So you can see some of these executables, like the Office suite there, 2007 and 2010 are quite lengthy, and that's because those are pretty big programs. But think about what this would look like, not just from a deployment standpoint, but from an imaging standpoint. Like leveraging Zenworks configuration management, I could image this with just a base Windows 7. Using the layered add-on imaging, I could inject these particular executables in whatever directory path that I wanted, and when the users first log in after the image, you're good to go. There is no install with these. This is just a regular user that happens to be logged into the system right now, not an admin. And so thus you can see that this user has the ability to just launch these applications and use them. Now let's go, let's take this one step farther. And what I'm going to do is just fire up a little local web server here. The web server can be whatever you want it to be. Of course, I want you to ask me later on that. Now picture, here's the concept on this one. Picture that I just went to a website, possibly your website, and I authenticated because I've got use or rights through here. And I clicked on a link of applications, and here's what you're showing me. So what we can do now is, like, for example, let's look at the Vlc Player. Now this is actually, instead of copying the local executable down for me, this is actually streaming the Vlc Player right across the web, and in my case, just a local web server. But right from a web server, this application is now running on my system, even if I don't have the executable or VLC installed. It's the same concept of like watching a video. You don't really have the video, you're just watching chunks of it as you needed it. So this is an example of streaming VLC, and you can see I've got OpenOffice and Firefox. It doesn't make a lot of sense to stream Firefox, but it's just an example here. So even if I didn't have these, like at the house or whatever, this is another way that I can deliver these via streaming the virtualized application. Okay. What I want to do now is I'm going to toggle over. Every one of those applications that you just saw me running were all built on an XP 32-bit system. And as you can see, they were running just fine on a Windows 7 64-bit. So another use of this is how we could virtualize applications that were not meant to run on these other platforms, and possibly this can be a way that you can do your migration, or at least provide these applications on these systems even though they weren't designed for that. And those things, I mean, need some testing on there. But again, that is an application for this. What you're looking at here is you can today go to the download.novell.com and download the Zenworks Application Virtualization Console. There is no server backend required for this. It's basically a console that we install in a workstation. As you're looking at here, we're looking at an XP workstation with the Zenworks Application Console installed here. This is the latest version. It's 8.03. You can download this and it will be fully functional for 60 days. Just the difference is that anything that you package up in here, it's going to prompt you that this is on eval, and these applications will automatically expire after the 60-day point. So that's your limitation on it. When you license it, all of those things kind of go away. So what I'm saying is you have the ability to pull this down and try this on your applications there in your environment. And once you package these up, you can move them around at will to systems and give it a try. There's no agent requirement or any kind of piece that needs to be in place to actually run these once you do them. So what I want to do is just quickly kind of walk through an easy one here to kind of show you what's involved in virtualizing an app and show you some of the options that are here. So again, I've installed the virtual console on this XP machine. It's a snapshot concept. What you basically do is start by clicking the capture before, which is a snapshot, and this goes back to any kind of application build capture. Is you take a before picture, we do the installation, and then we take an after picture, and then that leaves us with a project, and then from there we're going to build the virtualized app, and we can alter the project as we need to, make changes to it, rebuild, and then you're good to go from there. All right, so I just did a before capture on this system. Now it's time to do some kind of application install. So let's do something easy on here. I'm going to do Firefox 3612 here. I've already got it ready here, and let's do it. As I'm doing this, notice I've also got the 4.0 beta sitting there. Again, this is a great application for this because I could virtualize that beta one. And again, that's a great way to hand that out to some people, let them test it, and I'm not messing up their systems. You know, if they hate it, well, great, just get rid of the executable. I didn't mess up your native install or whatever else that you have on that system. So basically, I'm just installing Firefox. I just clicked a few options that I like. Yeah, we'll go ahead and launch it right now. So here, this is just a native installation of Firefox. No, we won't import anything because I don't want that stuff carrying over to anybody else that might use this. They can put in that stuff later. No, we don't want it to default. Let's go to Novell.com as a default page. And let's set that in my tools options. And again, I can make whatever options in here that I want to. You know, configure this the way I want it. Close it. Let's launch it one more time. Just make sure we like it. It should be at Novell.com. Great. That looks good. So once I get it where I want it, we're going to do a capture and get the differences. And what it's asking here is, where do I want to save the project files? Well, I'm going to make a new folder here and call it ZAV Firefox. And that's where I want it to save all of its different pieces here and build me a project. So here we go. We're going. This will take just a second here, and it will come back and show me what it's got. And here we go. So we're finished. Now notice up here, it's already picked up that I want my startup file to be firefox.exe. That's what's going to start up when we actually launch the virtual app. It wants an output file. So it's asking me, where do I want to save? Because it's going to build one executable for me. Where do I want to save that? Well, let's go, I usually like to save it back on the same spot, not that it matters. And what do we want to call the executable itself? It's an arbitrary name, still needs to be an exe. I'll just call it, get on the right keys here, ZAV Firefox. Okay, so my output file, when all is said and done, I'm going to have one file that's going to run it, and it's called ZAV Firefox. The next real step, if I'm not going to make any tweaks here, is to just go ahead and build it, which I'll do it right here. And then I'm going to take you through some of the other options here. Just I wanted to build this up for you so you at least see what it can do. So here it goes, admitting the target executable. And if you could actually hear the sound, which I don't know that you can, it actually makes a nice little microwave ding to show that we're done. Okay, So there we have it. Let's minimize the project there. And if I go into that folder, here is my executable. ZAV Firebox, you can see it's 35 meg. Well, let's test it and hope that it actually launches here. It appears to. And there it is, the Novell.com. So this executable now is ready for me to copy that off and distribute it as we need to my environment. Okay, let's go back into the project here and let's look at some other options. So right now I've got this as a project and I can save this configuration, make changes to it. I usually save it in different steps because I can always go back in here and make new steps or changes to it as I need to. I wanted to point out up here that you do have a configuration wizard that allows you to actually come in here and build virtual applications that they already have templates for. And I'll let this churn up here real quick because I want to show you some of the other examples that you can do. They've got things like 7-zip in there. That's not terribly interesting, but here's IE6, 7, and 8. They've even got the beta for IE9 in here. Here's all the Office. Now on these, you'll need to provide your own media and license key, but the others that'll download. Got Visio. Here's some Firefox options in here. There's Groupwise in the Messenger, Open Office, all sorts of fun things in here that they've already got a template. If you don't want to do it like I just did it in front of you, you can start with just a template, virtualize that up, and then try it out in your environment. But certainly you can capture your own applications like I just showed. Now what we're doing here is I want to show you the project itself. So this is showing me all of the files that it just captured for Firefox in my case. The default is that it's going to put these on full isolation, which means they will not interact with the system at all. I also have the option to merge these directories in. Like if I wanted to actually merge, if a real plugins directory was on the operating system, I could merge that in with whatever's here in the project. I've got access to all the registry, and I can add things to this. I can take things away as I need to. But here's all the registry that's inside the virtual application. Settings, I can do fun things like change its icon, change the splash image that pops up when my users launch it. I can do things here like automatically delete the sandbox, because here's the default sandbox location like I was talking about. It's in the user application profile area. But I can also delete the sandbox for this particular app next time they shut it if you just want to have it a clean install every time. What environment variables I want, how I want to control the virtual services. Now, I can also add runtimes here to this application, such as if I wanted to add .NET 1.1 or 2.0 or any of these, you just turn them on like that, and it's going to download and pack these in for you. You got Flash and 2 different versions of Adobe Reader that you can pack in here, the SQL Express. Now, this doesn't preclude you from just doing this as part of the capture. You can also do that, but this is just a nice little way to grab them from here if you wanted to. You can also make your own components. Like if I wanted to capture my own Java or my own piece, I could save that not as an application, but as a component, and then I can import that into my other projects here so that I can just keep using that over and over as I need to. You can also expire the applications after a set number of time period or after a set number of days. That way you can ensure that if the users take these home, that they're not just using your fully licensed software without, some type of expiration or some kind of check on it. Now, integration here with Zenworks Configuration Management, just as an added security here, I can actually require that you have the VCM agent installed on the box. Thus, you can ensure that whatever I virtualize, that it's only going to work on your managed devices, meaning they would not be able to take this particular application home or get it somewhere else. You could secure it that way, and you can actually take it a step further by actually specifying an address or a zone that that agent has to be actually registered to before this application is going to run. Lastly, just checking my time here. Okay, I'm actually doing pretty good on time. This is how I could actually convert this project into a streaming application. This is how you would profile it. What it does is it actually launches it up and it watches you use the application a little bit, and then you can build a model and then make a little certificate and copy these files up to a web server, and then this is a way that you could then present this to users via a streaming, like I was showing you with that VLC and that Firefox just a little bit ago. Now, I've run through this kind of fast because I just wanted to kind of show you the options and show you what's available. I need to stop here just for a second because I've got to go back over and see what kind of questions that we are actually generating here. Closing out of that. I'm stopping sharing. Okay.
And Pat, it looks like most of those questions came through on the chat is where you should see those.
And that's fine, and I can pop back into the share as I need to. I just wanted to get us kind of back to this because I can't see the questions as they were coming in.
Oh, yeah. No, you're fine.
So, again, let me just kind of wrap this up. That was a quick run-through on Zenworks application virtualization. It is a standalone piece to it. It does not require any server back-end to run it. It is basically a console that captures an application install, a process, and then you end up with an executable. That executable can be distributed in any way that makes sense. Now, most certainly, ZCM, or Zenworks Configuration Management, can be leveraged as a mechanism to deploy this, to secure it, to help users set up icons, different options about how you want to present that to them. That is a mechanism by which this can be leveraged. So let me just kind of start with the questions here. I'm going to click on these and see if it will show them. Actually, Q, what's the best way to tackle this? I'm clicking on Doug Emerson here, and it's not showing me his question.
Let's see. I could just go through and read them. I know there was a lot that were kind of left over from the last session as well. I can just go through.
Yeah, if you want to read them to me, I'll just take them and we can type them back in there as we need to, because I know we need to type these back, and we can handle it that way. So what? Yeah.
So first, in the chat, there was some. I got one from Bob Marquez that says, "Can you perform Microsoft updates on a virtualized application?" Okay.
So. And let me expand on that question. So his question is a good one. Can I put updates, to like Office, for example, which I assume that's what he's asking, or for that matter, how about Adobe? Because Adobe's got auto updater pieces to it, and so if I virtualize those, can I, actually let the app update inside of itself? And the answer is yes. By default, when I was in that console a second ago, and I was showing you the files, there was a checkbox over in one of the columns that says updatable or upgradable, whichever the syntax is. But what that means is that file can actually be changed, and that's where the Sandbox comes in. So you could let the application update itself inside, and it would write to that Sandbox. Now, after I've said that, to me a better practice might be, because again, at that point, your Sandbox is now different, or potentially different from the other ones that are running on different systems. Another approach to that, even though that would work, would be to, why not, the first thing I do is I turn off applications' ability to upgrade themselves, because I want a standard build that I know that I can control. So if there is an update, I would actually virtualize that update itself. I go ahead and install the app, upgrade it to the latest version, test it, make sure I'm okay, distribute that out to my groups, make sure that that's okay, because as I send them the new executable and they use it, if it's not working, all I got to do is put them back to the other one. That's my change control. But to me, it's a little bit more controlled process, is that I would rather, just build a new executable, a new virtual app that's got the new upgrades in it, and distribute that one out. And if it's good, then I take the other one away and hand you this one, and kind of move forward. But again, yes, you can update inside of it. I'm just giving you some other options.
All right. Then it said, the next one is, were those ZAV packages created on an XP machine or Windows 7 version? And then
okay. Now, in my particular example, all of those were built basically, actually, on that same XP machine that you were looking at. It was a 32-bit workstation. I like to virtualize it because it's easy to kind of reset, on that, or you can just do a clean I like to use clean XPs when I'm building these. But yes, in answer to the question, those were built on an XP 32-bit, and then I simply distributed or got them over to the Windows 7 64-bit, meaning just the executables after I was done.
Okay. Next one is, can the applications affect or modify the system it's running on?
They don't in any way by default. And then let me just amend that, meaning they will write to the Sandbox, which is in the user profile area. And you saw that I was showing examples about how to delete that. But they do not modify the actual registry or the actual system files themselves. All of that, any changes they make, writes to a Sandbox area, so they are not affecting the systems. However, I can have the virtual app actually merge with, like I was showing you on that one, I can set directories or files to actually merge and alter the base system if we needed to or if we wanted to. I've had applications that sometimes they need like a config INI, for example, and that config INI might change based on department, based on location. So what I would do is I would virtualize the app, but I would tell that app to merge with a real config.ini that I'm going to distribute to the system. And I can change that INI, however I want to. Like usually I'm using ZCM to do that. But the virtual app will merge with and use whatever config.ini that I have really on the system. I'm just giving you an example of where merge might come into play. But the short answer is no, it does, by default, it does not alter the base system, except for the Sandbox.
Great. Okay, and then the next one is, how does this work with large, complicated applications like Autodesk Revit or Autocad?
Well, it works in that for larger applications like, how about CS4, which I've done, CS3. It works in that, that is a huge executable. It's quite large, but it just runs inside of it. You need to decide the different components inside there. You can tell the virtual app with trigger words which component out of it that I want to run. Now, like when you're doing something large like CS4 or CS3, for that matter, I don't try to virtualize the entire package. I break it up by component, like Photoshop. That's one virtual app. Premiere and that kind of thing. I break out the pieces to it. But again, it is possible to wrap those things up. It's just going to be an extremely large virtual app.
All right. With Microsoft Office and Groupwise, how do you set up a physical install of Word to automatically use a virtual app of Groupwise? And then how do you set up the mail to in Word when Groupwise is virtualized?
Okay, so in earlier versions of our ZAV, we didn't really have a great answer on this, but with these later versions, what you're doing is, like for the mail to, that's just a shortcut. You can manipulate that in the registry. That's just telling whatever kicks, to the mail to, you can actually point at the ZAV Groupwise or whatever you've called the executable, and it can spawn that up. You can also, there's a piece in here where you can actually write into the MAPI extensions on the local system, which can, which are designed to kick up whatever mail executable that you have or profile, and thus that can be configured in such a way that the Groupwise virtual comes up. Any application that does a mail to or does a, kicks from the browser mail to, it's going to kick up the default MAPI, which again, you can write that to, hey, here's the target executable, here's its path, and go from there. Now, staying on this topic for a second, you've also got a tool in here called SpoonReg, and what it allows you to do is point the SpoonReg little executable at a virtualized app, and again, this is optional, but what it will do is it will write your extensions, it'll write to the real registry and map your file extensions for you back over to that virtual app. For example, nobody launches Adobe, and then does a file open and then opens up your PDF. Your users want to be able to double-click it right out of their email, or they want to be able to double-click a PDF doc, and they expect Adobe to fire up? Well, by default, in a virtual one, the operating system itself has no idea, that Adobe's installed, and thus you're going to get just that generic icon in there. But with SpoonReg, what it will do is if I do SpoonReg like ZAV Adobe or something like that, it will go into your registry and mark the .pdf and map that over where it's going to point at your ZAV Adobe, wherever it happens to be sitting when you SpoonReg'd it, and it'll put the little picture in there so that when a user double clicks or grabs the PDF out of the browser, it's going to kick up, the OS is just going to say, hey, what's associated with PDFs, and thus that application is going to launch. It's the same way with Office. You can register the virtual office, and thus when I double click a doc or a PPTX, that appropriate virtual application with that piece in it, like PowerPoint, would launch up so that the user would still get the same feel as if it was fully installed. I'm answering these kind of long-winded because I'm just trying to
cover it all.
Oh, yeah, I'm trying.
Okay, then the next one is, how is the performance of a virtual app compared to one installed fully on a system?
Well, so the newer systems, to be honest with you, like in my examples, you saw me launching those. That was a 1 meg Windows 7 box. 1 meg of RAM, about 20 gigs of hard drive space. And technically, there's almost no delay. You might see on older systems, because again, this needs to spawn up into RAM. It's not, the executable itself is a little larger than the traditional executable. You might see a few seconds more delay on that, but overall, typically, the user should not really notice the difference. Now, granted, the larger apps are going to take a little bit, more meat to get fired up, like you saw when I launched the Excel 2010. That's big executable, so we might see a little bit more lag on those, just getting them started. Then once you're in them and moving around, you shouldn't see any difference.
Okay, how is ZAV licensed?
ZAV is licensed by user, meaning you're going to tell Novell how many users are going to use virtual applications. It doesn't matter how many virtual applications you do, it's just these are the users. And it can be licensed by device, meaning I have this many devices and I'm going to virtualize, any number of virtual apps, but they're going to be used on this number of devices. So you have, it's one or the other. But it doesn't license it by, oh, I'm only going to virtualize 5 applications. It doesn't work like that. You do user or you do device count.
Let's see. The next one is, why would this be better than the Windows 7 XP compatibility mode? And then would this work with Windows 7 Home Ultimate, for example?
Okay. As far as better than, this is actually carrying over files that compatibility mode possibly may miss. Also, and I'm not saying that, I'm not going to say this is better, but think about, so with compatibility mode, I still had to worry about getting the thing installed traditionally. Still got to worry about it running because, again, even in compatibility mode, I'm still moving around on a real OS trying to manipulate things. This is all running inside of its own little memory space with the files, the exact files I wanted it to use. If there were particular system files that I wanted it or that it needed, I could put those into virtual and make sure that it uses only those and not the incompatible ones. And I'm tossing examples. So it's not really a better than, just a different option. And to me, it's got some advantages. Like we were talking about the portability, the safe execution. It's easy to, there is no install, that kind of thing. I'm sorry, what was the second part of that? Or did I answer this? You said, what is this better?
And then the next one, would this work with Windows 7 Home Ultimate, for example?
And it should, because again, these are executables that technically have all the pieces that app needs inside of it. So it's really not based on a different flavor, like home or premium or professional or anything like that. These are designed, now it needs to be Windows, because again, I can't run this on a Mac, and that would be cool, or a Linux or anything. That would be really cool. But no, this needs to be a Windows platform. But I would say yes, it should function on Ultimate just like it does on this Windows 7 Professional.
Okay. Then next we have, if set to delete sandbox when streaming, does it create a sandbox and delete the sandbox after closing?
Well, no, streaming is different. And that is another way that you can distribute the app. See, I mean, one way to give you the app is I get you the executable. That's not streaming. You know, I am handing you the executable. Now, whether you're running that executable off a shared drive or you're running it local, you're running it as a program, and it makes a sandbox there. Now, when you're streaming it, there is a cache area, but again, it's just for that runtime right then and there of that application. It really, the pieces it leaves behind aren't really usable, is what I'm trying to say. So that's a different way of doing it. So again, you kind of weigh out, you know, what makes the most sense. You know, because in one method, I'm actually handing you something that, you know, you could run offline, because, you know, streaming, I need to be connected to that web server as I'm doing it. I can't do that in an offline mode. However, if I give you the executable, yeah, that can be run whether you're connected or not. I hope I'm answering that.
Yeah.
Just kind of pointing out there's just two different ways to go about it.
Okay, next question is, can programs interact or be bundled? For example, could Office 2003 be bundled or work with Office 2007 Compatibility Pack, which is a separate app?
Yes. What you do is you would capture the, I mean, and again, I'm just high level here. You capture Office 2003, service packet, put your compatibility pack on there, put your add-ins. You know, if you've got, especially like school districts, they've got like Google Doc add-ins or something, you know, the little add-ins that you like, get all that configured, get it the way you want it, and then capture all of that, and then, yes, you know, your compatibility pack is already built inside of the virtual app. So, yes, I mean, you can include, you know, like, and for, just to expand on that example, let's say I needed, you know, Java or some other pieces added in there, just, you know, toss them on in there. And then, again, now that's growing the executable size, but the end result is you've got it all together.
Okay, let's see. The next one is, does it save cookies and passwords for Internet settings?
Like if so I'm assuming he's talking about if I virtualize a browser, is it going to write those cookies, Internet settings? Well, the answer is yes. Again, this would be an example of the sandbox piece. It doesn't save it in the traditional area unless we go into that project and tell it, I want you to merge, you know, with the local app settings, you know, internet temp files, that sort of thing. Otherwise, all of this kind of stuff is getting written to the sandbox. So yes, I mean, by default it would. Now, if I deleted the sandbox every time, like if I wanted to make a nice portable browser and I don't want you saving all that stuff, you know, that might be a great example of deleting the sandbox so that it starts fresh, you know, back from day one every time you launch it.
Okay, let's see. The next one is, how are file associations handled in ZAV?
Okay, we touched on that earlier when I was talking about the spoon reg. Yeah. Another option is that there is actually an Msi Builder inside of that console. It's the setup button down there where you can actually set up all your file extensions right there and click the build. And what it does is it'll build an MSI for you that does the file extensions for you and, you know, copies the ZAV executable for you into place. It's an option. I mean, you don't have to do it that way, but that is another way. You know, you got spoon reg, you got that MSI Builder where you can do it in there. Another way that I've done it is I've just sent, you know, leveraging ZCM, I've just shot the registry down myself, you know, because you're basically manipulating the root class, like .pdf, and you tell it in the shell, in the run, you know, what's the path to the executable. And so that is yet another option that you can do.
Okay. Let's see, the next one is, what is the best place to store the sandbox for apps if users jump from PC to PC?
So you could rewrite it for that particular app. I mean, again, it comes out, you got to kind of look at this per app. if it really makes sense, if it's critical, if they just got to have those settings, for that app and everything, could write it out to maybe their home directory. I'm just tossing out some ideas. We could write it back to USB, but that would require that they, carry that USB around with them. Or, worst case is, hey, they have sandboxes on several machines, and granted, each of those will save their preferences. These are just kind of the things I'm just tossing out of things that you kind of weigh out. Is it preferences that are just, man, they're just critical, you just got to have them, or hey, if it's just setting a few paragraph settings and your default font, maybe you just do that on your systems.
Okay, let's see. The next one is back to the licensing. Just to follow up on that, it said, can you explain how the number of instances is controlled since there's no back end per se?
Well, it doesn't, that's what I'm saying, it doesn't control it by instances. So, I mean, you can put this console on as many machines as you need it, because the console is only for building it. I don't need the console to run it or anything, so it's just not licensed that way, and it doesn't track, what if I built 30 apps, and virtualized them all? It doesn't count it that way. It's just that you tell Novell, I got this many users that I'm going to provide virtualized apps to, or I got this many devices that I'm going to provide some number of virtualized apps to. So no, it doesn't check it by instance or anything like that.
Perfect. All right. The next one is an example. A PDF is infected with malware. When the file is opened with a virtual Adobe reader, can the virus install on the client?
So I'm thinking about just the mechanics of that. So the PDF is infected. It's going to launch, well, I'd have to see that in action, but I would say no, because it's going to write to the sandbox. I mean, it can infect the sandbox, but, who cares? You're not touching the main systems. I'd have to know a little bit more about that particular virus, but my first answer would be no, because it's going to write to things that the virtual Adobe would see, and the virtual Adobe is seeing a bunch of virtual system files. To it, it's the real ones. And so when you, call the, like the run DLL system32.dll or something, it's a virtual one that it needs. And so it's not, if I'm going to make a change to that, that's going to the sandbox through Adobe, because Adobe's virtualized, and he doesn't see the real ones. Again, I'm sitting here talking out loud, and I would not see how that would be possible. But again, I would need to know the particulars of that particular infection. But in general, no.
Okay, let's see. The next one is, if you set the require ZCM agent, does that carry over if you move the app to a streaming format?
No, it does. The streaming on there is kind of a different area in the console. So no, that requirement shouldn't carry over unless, there's different options in there that you can secure on that. But so no, it doesn't carry over to streaming. That's meant for the executable itself.
Okay. Let's see. The next one is, how does ZAV deal with applications that are specialized and utilize external peripherals? An example being an application that utilizes USB devices that need drivers to be used on the local user's PC.
Okay, well, thus you have hit an area. So I would say, you can virtualize, I'd say probably 90%, maybe even higher of productivity apps in your environment. But yes, ones that have to enumerate a driver as part of the install, meaning because I've got to manipulate into the device manager and, set up a given instance. These are probably examples of one that, unfortunately, I'm probably not going to be able to virtualize that. And an example of that is like, I can't virtualize the Novell client, for example, just for all the pieces that it uses with the login and the GINA and stuff like that. So, there are applications, and ones like, I can't virtualize things like Roxio or something that's going to enumerate or install itself and write into the CD-ROM, on that capacity of it, the way that would work. Because, like you said, that's going to enumerate with a driver. So there are applications that just aren't going to virtualize. But an application that just needs to see, some kind of USB device that's plugged in, not necessarily a driver, that's going to work. Applications can print, they can scan through that because, again, I'm just hitting, I'll reach down through the OS at that point and use whatever device that's actually installed.
Great. Going along with that, is there a list of apps that known not to work with ZAV?
We've got I can send you over, it's not really a list of apps. It would be like a list of things that, hey, if the app does this, probably not going to be able to virtualize it. And again, it's things that have to enumerate hardware like that. Probably not, a candidate. I can't virtualize virus scanning, and those kind of things, because that's kind of low-level stuff that has to be, running and scanning and that kind of thing.
Okay. Next one is, so would a virtualized web browser prevent malware that exploits the browser from being able to affect the PC the browser is running on?
Yes. Because, again, if you're writing your, here I am a malware piece, and I'm going to snap some plug-in, into this browser session. So I'm grabbing files inside of this session and doing that. So, yes, I'm messing up that Sandbox one, but other than that, no. Now, if I'm going to run an application outside of the browser, like let's say through the browser I downloaded some kind of, I'm just say setup exe or something, and then I double-clicked and installed that. Okay, we're not in the virtual anymore. If that makes sense. So, are you totally protected when you virtualize things? Well, no. I'm not going to tell you that. Oh, yeah, you're all safe. The way I would protect you ultimately there is you don't give the user admin rights anyway, because then even if they download something, it only has the rights of what you have. But there would be, granted, they can mess up their virtual browser, but it's not things they do inside there or mess up or put, bad plugins in there that are going to try to grab stuff is going to just be in the virtual.
Okay, great. And there's just a few more that we will probably have time for, and then we'll have to break for the next one. But the next one is it always best practice to split program suites into smaller apps, i.e. Word, Excel, PowerPoint? Does this affect any integration in the suite?
Well, it's not necessarily like a best practice. It's you kind of weigh out, what works best. Now, for Office, I'd wrap all that up because just the way, Office is so tightly integrated, and it's not that I can't, have virtual apps called virtual apps and that kind of stuff. That's, that's manipulating file extensions and stuff like that. But for Office, I think it makes most sense to go ahead and wrap all that together. Other components, like when I was talking about the CS4 and stuff like that, I just broke that up just because of the sheer size. And, and I could still, those programs could still interact because a lot of times what a program does is when I need to call another one is I'm just launching, like an app with a given file extension. This is a typical scenario. And the operating system is launching whatever application is associated with that extension. So, again, when you break things up, that's kind of how you can trick the OS into thinking all that's really installed, even though these are all separate components. So you just have to kind of weigh out, does it make sense? To me, I like to bundle up Office altogether. Other things, maybe it makes sense to break them up or not.
Okay, are the templates updated regularly?
They are as the version updates. Like, for example, this is 8.03. Typically, you're seeing a new version probably every 3 months, I'm saying, once a quarter maybe, something like that. So, yeah, the templates are thusly updated about that time.
Okay. If a virtual web browser is created and the user adds favorites/bookmarks, and then the admin distributes an updated virtual browser app, is there a way that the user can use the updated browser and keep the bookmarks?
There is some ways, not getting into all the ins and outs of that, but you can merge sandboxes. There's ways to leverage sandboxes from other apps, that because those shortcuts might be leveraged over there. Another way that you might consider doing that, and I'm just tossing this out as an idea off the top of my head, is what if we actually let them, merge with their real profile area of favorites, on both of them, and that way I'm just leveraging what's already there, if that makes sense. I'm telling the virtual app, hey, for the favorites, I want you to merge with this real area on the OS, and that way all of my virtual apps will just, use that area, and that could be favorites and settings, and I'm just tossing that out and something. Ultimately, what this comes down to is I encourage everyone on this is, to download this and take a look at it. Virtualize some apps, try some of these scenarios, that we're talking through here. Give them a kick around and try. And as you have questions, feel free to, I can be a resource, and or I will find your resource if I can't do that. But I encourage you to give this a try, because you can download this. It will fully function. It'll just give you an annoying prompt, that you're not licensed, and it will expire the app. But you still have, the full tool to give this a try.
Great. And, yeah, that's all the time we have for questions. I know there's a few others. So, Pat, if you could just stay on after this and maybe answer a few more of those offline in the Q&A session. So all you have to do is just click on each of the questions, and you can answer it in the Q&A. And then we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thanks, Pat, for the information. Wonderful, wonderful session. Great information presented.
Thank you very much for y'all's time today.
Thanks, Pat. You have a good day.
You too.
So what we're going to do right now is we're going to take just a short break as we get everyone else prepared for the next session. Thanks again, everyone, for being here. We should be starting the next session in about